Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. A very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good, and I hope that all of you have made it a habit to attend these sessions live at 10 a.m. where we analyze the most important news stories of the Hindu newspaper of that day. As you all know, and I would like to remind you once again, as soon as this session comes to an end, all of you need to move over to our Telegram channel where we have a quiz waiting for you based on the topics that we discuss right here so that you can revise them. Just in case you have still not become a part of our Telegram channel, you can use the link given in the description of this video to become a part of that channel as well. These are the topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. About 3 topics from the mains exam point of view. First, the need to have EIA, that is Environment Impact Assessment. Special regards to the Indian Himalayan region, which has been struck by a lot of tragedies. We just saw the flash floods on the Teesta River in Sikkim that has led to multiple loss of lives. That is why there is an article written on why there is a requirement to have very stringent environmental impact assessment before any project is finalized. Then the second article is about the risk of artificial intelligence as it exists around the world. And the third article is about the concept of palliative care. Palliative care is taking care of people who are usually suffering from non-communicable diseases, making sure that they are not over-medicating themselves, usually given to people not with regards to medicine, but with regards to their well-being. Then from the prelims exam point of view, there are again 3 news stories that we have taken up. First, the Supreme Court has declined the abortion plea. This is a topic that has been in the news for the past week or so. There has been a unique case of a lady 26 weeks pregnant going to the Supreme Court demanding that she should be granted the right to get abortion. The Supreme Court finally has denied that. Then we'll be discussing about how Gaganyaan's test flight is all set to commence on the 21st of October. And then from the front page, the Supreme Court has said that the case about electoral bonds, whether these are constitutional or not, will be decided by a 5-judge constitution bench. So let's not delay any further. Let's begin with the very first article. The first article is about the need to have environmental impact assessment, that is EIA. And where exactly? In the Indian Himalayan region. Now let's first understand the idea of what you mean by EIA. The idea is simple. Let's say you are building a big infrastructure project in those areas which are extremely fragile. Let's assume in the mountainous regions nearby the foothills of the Himalayas or very near to, let's say, a big river, you are building a big infrastructure project. It can be a dam, it can be a hydropower project, it can be building of resorts or anything. Before doing that, there has to be a proper assessment of that project. Assessment in the sense, what impact would it have on the population living nearby? What impact would it have on the overall environment of that place? What will be the future impact? For example, what will happen 5 years down the line? What will happen 10 years down the line? Only when all this study is conducted and everything seems good to go, only in that case should the project go ahead. This is the entire idea of environmental impact assessment. That is, make sure that you first assess the impact on the environment of any major project before giving it a go-ahead. Now, this is not an Indian idea. It's an idea that started in the US in 1970s, and since then, a lot of nations have adopted this idea. Now, the theme of this article is, in India, although we do have a law, there are rules about environmental impact assessment, but it does not take into consideration some of those areas that are extremely fragile and need special care to be taken. Specifically, the author here is referring to the Indian Himalayan region. In this entire article, it is referred to as IHR. So the authors here say that the Indian Himalayan region is unlike the other parts of the country. You cannot have the same standards of projects being made, for example, in a flat area as compared to projects that are being made or that are being manufactured or set up in the Indian Himalayan region. That is why there is a need to have a separate environmental assessment law or rules with regards to these kind of areas. The context in which this is written, as we discussed, is about the breach of the Teesta Dam that has caused immense damage in Sikkim, including the loss of life and also loss of many army equipments. that are being flown away to large distances. Now, the basis of EIA, that is Environmental Impact Assessment, it started with the UN taking a lead. The United Nations Environment Programme defines this as a tool to identify environmental, social, economic aspect of a project before it is implemented. See, the idea of development is, development cannot come at the cost of people living in that area. You cannot justify that just because this project will lead to generation of jobs, just because this project will lead to more money, that does not really give you the right to displace the people or impact the lives of the people or the environment of the people living in that area. This is where an environmental impact assessment is necessary. However, the key here is, for any such assessment to be accurate, it has to rely on credible data. All this study that is conducted about environmental impact assessment, it's based on data, based on numbers. And if those numbers and that data in itself is faulty, then the entire idea of having an EIA is defeated. So the author here says we must ensure that there is a proper database that is created to take up any such study. If you look at the history of EIA in India, India started with something that was called as environmental clearance. Rather than calling it EIA, we called it environment clearance. The beginning of it was in the 1970s when the Planning Commission said that the Department of Science and Technology should assess the river valley projects from an environmental point of view. Later on, our Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, under the Environment Protection Act of 1986, gave the first ever official notification of environment impact assessment in India. Now, since then, there have been two important notifications given. First important notification was in 2006. So in 2006, the Government of India, specifically the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they released a notification about how environmental impact assessment should go on. This was appreciated by a lot of people because of a lot of positive pointers. For example, the state governments were given the power to issue clearances in certain cases. They did not always have to be dependent on the center government. So it was more about decentralization of powers. However, from time to time, these rules have been changed. These rules have been modified depending upon the requirement. The problem started in 2020. In 2020, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change released new set of rules for public comments, and this has invited a lot of criticism. It is being seen that the government is trying to be overtly friendly to the industries, and the Government of India is trying to disregard any warning signs with respect to the impact on the environment for such projects. This is why these new rules of 2020 have now become the matter of great debate and discussion. Because for the government, it is important to walk on this thin line between being too overtly pro-business and being pro-environment. You have to have a balance in between the two. I'll give you a couple of examples. Talk about Bhutan. Now, our neighboring country Bhutan is regarded around the world as a country that gives a lot of priority to its environment. So much so that they do not really want to get into a lot of agreements with nations around the world just because they want to preserve their environment. I'll give you an example. So there's a project you might have all heard of called BBIN. Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal. This was supposed to be a highway to cover all these four countries, Bhutan, Bangladesh, India and Nepal. Bhutan first agreed to be a part of it, but later on, a few months back, Bhutan's parliament rejected the idea and said that no, we don't want unwanted trucks to enter into our country because of our environment is too fragile and we do not want our environment to be spoiled just because of some trucks entering into our country. So for them, they have given a priority to environment disregarding any type of development. Then there are other countries around the world where you see development that is happening at the cost of environment, where the nations have decided that it is more important to build jobs for the people rather than thinking of the environment. This is where we are trying to walk this thin line of not being overtly dependent on one side and not ignoring the other side. But it's easier said than done. The EIA is an extremely important tool to do that. The 2006 notification, as I talked about, it talks about projects only that are mentioned in the schedule that require a prior environmental clearance. So basically not all the projects require environmental clearance. I'll give you an example once again. Let's assume you own a land within a city, and on that land tomorrow you want to construct your house. Now the question that I have is, would you have to go to the government specially to get an environmental clearance because you are building a house on your own land? No. Because if you do this, if every single project of construction, even minor constructions, have to be first taking permission from the government, obviously you're defeating the entire purpose, you're increasing the load of the government. So only few scheduled construction would require prior environmental clearance. For example, including mining, extraction of natural resources, power generation, physical infrastructure, etc. However, as per the author, there was no special provision made for the Indian Himalayan region. The author says that this region should have been considered separately, which has not been done. The rules are the same for the entire country. Right now, the rules are only categorized into whether a project is happening or taking place in a protected forest, reserved forest, national park, or a critical tiger habitat. But they don't talk about special permissions required if a project is to be built in the Indian Himalayan region. And that is why we have seen a lot of tragedies happening in the Indian Himalayan region. What happened in Sikkim is just one example of it. We have seen so many tragedies, flash floods in Uttarakhand. We have seen these kind of tragedies in Himachal Pradesh. We have seen these becoming all too frequent for anyone's comfort. And thus, it's not the first time that something like this is actually happening in this region. The other problem with the EIA is there is no specific regulator at the national level. Although the Supreme Court had said in 2011 that the Government of India must ensure that there is an objective, a neutral body at the national level that will regulate whether the projects have to be given the EIA or not. Why is this the idea? Understand this. If the government itself will assess the impact of a project, they would obviously give green light to their projects. Why would you say no to a project that you are building? If the government has decided to build a project, they will obviously want to give it a go-ahead. So having an independent regulator is extremely important, which has not been done so far. And these all are the problems that we face in the EIA being implemented properly on ground. It is available on paper, but when it comes to actually implementing it, we have not seen the kind of impact that we should. The environmental impact assessment contains all these steps. First, the screening of the project, then assessing the risk, then can we mitigate or minimize this impact or not. See, every construction project will have at least some impact on the environment. You cannot possibly have a policy that you will only construct something if there is a zero impact on the environment. That's just not possible. The question is, how big are those impacts? Can you mitigate those? Can you bring them down somehow? This is what is meant by mitigation. Then you take a decision and then you monitor whether the project is being constructed within the set parameters, within the given permissions or not. Now, since this article mentions the EIA notification of 2006 and 2020, it's important to look at the important pointers of these notifications. So the 2006 notification basically was appreciated because it gave more powers to the states. It decentralized this concept. It said that there will be two categories of projects, national level and state level, and thus the state level projects can get their clearance from the state itself. It also talked about different stages of the project. The different stages include screening, scooping, public hearing, and even appraisal. There would be different categories of projects. Category A that requires mandatory clearance and they do not have to undergo screening process, while category B have to undergo a screening process as well. These mandatory clearances are required for projects such as mining, thermal power plant, infrastructure, river valley, etc. This is what 2006 notification was all about. Now, the 2020 notification that has been released by the government for public opinion, which has created a lot of flutter, it talks about public consultation. It is proposed to be reduced to maximum of 40 days. The time period provided for public to submit any objections that they have is reduced to 20 days as compared to 30 days earlier. All this is being seen as the government's attempt to be too overtly friendly to industries and ignoring what the common people in that area would have wanted. It also talks about how the government thinks that having a shorter window for people to raise objections would be in the interest of these projects. There are concerns that the environmental activists have raised because of more power that has been given to the government in deciding whether the project should go ahead or not. Again, understanding a problem is the easier part. You, me, anyone here can understand this problem of environment being harmed because of these projects. The difficult part is solving the problem. The difficult part is, can you now be or take the middle path in such a way that you can mitigate the impact on the environment and you can assess the impact that it will have on the economic growth as well. So it's not an easy problem to solve, but at the end of the day, this is what the governments are here for. The next article that we have here is on the topic of artificial intelligence, that is AI, and the risk of AI that we are seeing around the world now. All of you, I am sure, are familiar with the advancement that artificial intelligence has made in the past few years, especially with the introduction of platforms such as ChatGPT. It has now become a part of our everyday lives. In simple terms, artificial intelligence means machines that become smart and learn by themselves. Now, artificial intelligence on one hand can be extremely helpful in improving your productivity of work, in making sure that companies become more profitable, you reduce the human component, you make the machines take most of the decisions. So on paper at least, it seems that the probability of making an error is reduced. However, having said that, it has become extremely risky, because once you leave it to the machines to take certain decisions and you are not able to regulate their behavior, it becomes extremely challenging. Now, the issue is, around the world, as per the author, we do not have any international agreement amongst the nations about where to use AI and where not to use AI. I'll give you an example of what the debate is about. So let's assume there are different areas, let's say medicine, let's say defense, let's say research, medical research, etc., teaching. Now the question is, should AI be used in all of these or not? The author here is making a point that the countries must come together to decide that certain things should remain away from the reach of AI. AI or artificial intelligence should not be used in some of these which are too important to have any machine running it without a human interference. For example, there is a lot of debate on how the COVID-19 crisis started. Let's assume, and we have not come to a conclusion of that debate, but let's assume you use AI to conduct some experiments in the labs. Now, because there is no human intervention, maybe the machine takes a decision to leak a certain virus, and the world is not ready to fight against that virus. That threat of AI has to be stopped. How to do that? The author is suggesting that there should be some aspects which should be left away from AI. But for that to be successful, every country in the world has to accept that yes, we will follow the rules. This is where the problem starts. For example, let's say every country today says, we will not use AI in conducting biochemical experiments. We will not use AI in our labs when they are trying to have some virus or bacteria or any parasite experiment. But if China still does it, hiding it from the world, it still creates that danger. So the problem with AI and AI regulation is, in order for it to be successful, you have to make sure that the entire world is abiding by that. And this is where the problem starts. Our dependence on AI, our dependence on using machines to make our productivity better has now created such an environment that countries and people are trying to use AI in as many ways as possible. Although the countries around the world are concerned with this, as per this article, about 127 countries have passed about 37 laws, which included the words artificial intelligence somewhere. So it is applicable, or it is good to note that most countries are concerned about AI. They're trying to regulate. But unless we have an international agreement on which every country agrees, it will still remain a problem. The European Union, for example, has made very strict regulations about AI, where AI can be used, where AI cannot be used. But if every country, for example China, does not enact such regulations and others do, it would then have an edge over other countries which will not like, and it will also create a dangerous environment as well. So if we really have to curtail this problem, if we really have to make sure that the situation does not go out of hands, we have to make sure that before it does, there is a global consensus on how AI has to be used and how AI has to be regulated. Now, AI in itself has a lot of challenges. You might see a lot of articles, fake videos also online, where it is shown that a robot becomes uncontrollable, starts killing people. All these are future realities that can turn out to be true. Because the more intelligent that you make machines, the more problem it would create, because they would take their decisions without any human emotions. And the moment you take out human emotions before taking a certain decision, it becomes very problematic. It would be very, very difficult to control the machines. And the interesting part is, around the world, many well-known people have been speaking about having regulations on AI. For example, Elon Musk. If you look at his interviews, in his multiple interviews, he has talked about the need to regulate AI. For example, he is extremely pessimistic about the future of AI. He says that there will be a time that the robots will control the entire world, and if you have to stop that from happening, you have to ensure that there are proper regulations in place about what can the AI be used for and what it cannot be used for. But with every country trying to gain an upper hand over the others, it's difficult to stop everyone from using the power of AI. The aspect of AI being used in military in terms of chemical weapons, it also becomes very, very, very problematic. There are so many news stories about armies around the world trying to use robots to fight their war, trying to use machines to fight their war, trying to eliminate the human factor. All of that becomes even more challenging. It will lead to even more destruction in the coming years. And to stop that from happening, the only answer is to have AI regulations in place. Now, this is an example of what EU has done. So EU basically have made regulations about the use of AI, in which sector can it be used and in which sector it cannot be used. For example, it says that in mass surveillance, manipulating the behavior of individuals, it cannot be used. Then, to access the employment, education, public services, safety components of vehicle, law enforcement, etc., it can be used, but under very strict provisions. As a chatbot for biometric categorization, for emotion in recognition, etc., it still has risk. It can be used, but again, there have to be rules that are in place. And in the remaining areas, it can be used. So EU has specifically categorized in what areas AI can be used and in what areas it cannot be used. But again, the success of such approach lies only in the condition that every country adopts it. Even if there's one country that is an outlier that says that no, I will still adopt AI, it becomes a challenge for the entire world in that case. Also, these are usually the different types of AI that we see around the world. The reactive AI, that is usually the most basic version. It can ensure that it recognizes certain parameters, certain scenarios. Then we have limited memory AI, then the theory of mind, which is able to understand human motives and reasoning. And the last goal will be self-aware, where it can even surpass human intelligence. So this is kind of the progression scale of AI, of where the technology starts and what is the end goal of AI. When it comes to this stage, it will be extremely dangerous, because in that case, it will supersede the decision-making capabilities of a human being. The next article that we have is with regards to palliative care. Now, the article is focused on India's lack of focus on palliative care, on the fact that the government has not given enough funds and the government has not given enough time also to palliative care. This is not the first time that we are discussing this article or we are discussing this particular topic, but just in case you have forgotten what it is, palliative care in simple terms focuses on improving the quality of life and preventing suffering amongst those with life-limiting illnesses. So basically the people who are already suffering from extremely bad diseases, let's say such as cancer, the idea is to make sure that they are taken care of, not just feeding them medicines, but also keeping them in the positive frame of mind, making sure that whatever they require to have a better life quality, that is given to them. This is called palliative care. It talks about decreasing the medicines intake which is not required, so it prevents the risk of over medicalization. It also focuses on not spending a lot of money, because what happens is, let's say if a specific person is ill with a very bad life-threatening disease, they spend months and in some cases even years in the hospital, thus draining out their expense, reducing their quality of life also. The alternate to that is palliative care, focusing more on improving the quality of life by having psychological, spiritual and social domain of the people in focus. The diseases, for example, which are focused here are heart failure, kidney failure, neurological diseases, cancer, etc. Again, it's not about administering diseases. It's more about keeping the people in healthy, right frame of mind, so that if they have any chances of recovering, they can, without spending loads of money just because they're admitted in the hospital and they're connected to multiple machines at one point of time. The problem here is very few people in India actually have access to this kind of care. As per a recent report, 1 to 2% of about a crore people in India who require palliative care actually get access to it. We have multiple health programs on the side of the government. We have the National Health Mission. We have the Ayushman Bharat Health Insurance Scheme. But even then, very few people actually get hands on it. Because, see, especially if you talk about the poor section of the society, for them, if a person is unhealthy, if a person is ill, the simple idea is to give medicine to that person, keep giving or consuming the medicine till the time that you are ill. It's not believed that you should stop the medicine or focus on the other aspects also, because that is how our thinking is. We don't really focus on spiritual aspect of an ill person. We don't really think about keeping the person happy in a positive frame of mind. We focus a lot more on getting the person admitted to the hospital, taking a lot of medication. That deteriorates the health of the person even further. This is where palliative care takes or has to bring or has to be considered as a topmost priority. Now, the government of India in 2010 started something called the National Program for Prevention and Control of Cancer, Diabetes, Cardiovascular Diseases and Stroke. It is now renamed as National Program for Prevention and Control of Non-Communicable Diseases. This is a program that focuses on palliative care, because these are the diseases that can be corrected or whose negative effects can be reduced if you focus a lot on palliative care. However, under this national program, we have certain guidelines which are not adequate enough. For example, the revised program that we have, it released its guidelines in May 2023. It mentions palliative care only with respect to cancer. Yes, cancer is one of the most life-threatening diseases that we have. It is extremely bad, or a person who is suffering from cancer, but that doesn't mean that only the people suffering from cancer require palliative care. The author here is arguing that apart from cancer also, there are close to 19 other diseases that require palliative care. For example, there can be cardiovascular diseases, there can be someone suffering from a neurological disorder where the person does not have control over his or her own reflexes, where the person's memory basically starts to drain out. All of that requires palliative care. But for the government's point of view, they are focusing only on cancer patients. Secondly, palliative care is a concept that can be best implemented in home conditions. If you ask the person to be admitted in the hospital to get palliative care, then the entire purpose is defeated. Because the entire idea is for the person to stay in a home environment, not to be burdened by all this expenditure, all this financial burden. That is the entire idea. But now if you ask a person that no, you have to be in the hospital itself all the while, only then you will get the care, then the idea of the palliative care itself gets defeated here. And this is where again the problem starts. Because in this entire guideline, as per the author, there is no mention of home-based palliative care. Although the Government of India in 2012 announced a national program for palliative care, there has not been any budget given to it. So again, first, focusing only on cancer. Second problem, focusing only on hospital-based care. Third problem, no specific budget for palliative care program. All of these mean that in India, the idea of palliative care has been defeated and has not been the focus. Around the world, there has been an increasing demand, in fact, made that palliative care should be a part of health systems around the entire world at all the levels. It reduces the consumption of medicines. It focuses on alternative treatments. It focuses on keeping the people in the right frame of mind going forward. But most countries, especially in the developing world, have not taken the steps that are required. The one important thing that we usually do not focus on in India is that India is based, or India has a huge burden of non-communicable diseases. See, the human mind works in such a way that you're always more concerned and scared about communicable diseases. See the COVID-19 crisis when it started. When a disease can get transferred from one person to another, the people are more concerned about this, the people are more scared of it, so they take more precautions. But many more people die because of non-communicable diseases in the country, and very few people pay the attention that it requires. Look at diabetes, asthma, look at cardiovascular diseases. All of these diseases have a major burden on India. However, even then, we do not really focus on these diseases, and thus the palliative care section has been ignored considerably. The article mentioned about how only 1 to 2% people get the palliative care that they require. This was on the basis of a FICCI report that came out about an year back, October 2022. That a very small amount of people, if 100 people, for example, require this kind of care, only 1 to 2 people will get this care in the best possible scenario. That is where most of the challenge lies. WHO also talks about palliative care. They define a care that provides relief from pain and other distresses. It affirms that life and dying is a normal process. It intends not to postpone or to hasten the death. It just makes sure that there is spirituality that is integrated in the person in the right frame of mind, to look ahead, to see the inevitable issues that lie at the end of the life. These are the 3 articles from the mains examination point of view. Then from the prelims point of view, we again have 3 news stories that we would like to discuss. The first one is about a case that is a lot in the news in the last week or 10 days. So this case is about a pregnant lady who is right now 26-week pregnant, and she wants to abort her pregnancy. Now, before we go ahead, let's try and understand what is the law in India. So in India, we have something called the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. This act talks about maximum getting an abortion in 24 weeks. So usually it's 20 weeks, but under certain circumstances, it can go up to 24 weeks as well. However, in this case, the lady who is 26 weeks pregnant has been demanding that she should be given the right to have an abortion. The Supreme Court, who has been hearing this matter daily, has asked multiple opinions from the doctors, from the AIMS board to talk about what will be the health of the kid. Because what happens in this case is, usually, if the Supreme Court thinks that there is a grave danger to the life of the mother who is about to give birth, in that case, the Supreme Court may go ahead and give permission to abort the pregnancy. But if the Supreme Court thinks or the doctors say that there is no concern on the health of the women due to the pregnancy, then you will not see the Supreme Court allowing any women to terminate the pregnancy. And this is what has happened here as well. The Supreme Court has denied the plea that no, you cannot terminate the 26-week pregnancy, because the Supreme Court says it will be like killing of the child in the womb, and we cannot allow this. Now, there are a lot of different aspects to this case. First, the Supreme Court was angry. Why did the women wait for such a long time if she really had to abort the baby? Secondly, the women's argument is that she has been suffering from postpartum depression. So she has been depressed ever since the birth of her second child. So she already has 2 children, and she says that I am not mentally fit enough to take care of another child. That is what her argument is, that even if the child is born healthy, I would not be in a position to take care of the child going forward. So it's better if the child is not born. But the Supreme Court says that no, this is not how it works. Supreme Court says that Article 21 that talks about right to life, which talks about right to life with dignity, cannot be applied here. Over here, the word life basically means life and death situation, and only medical opinion can decide whether the person's life or the women's life would be in danger while giving the birth or not. As you know, Article 21 has been expanded considerably, which includes the right to have a dignified life as well. Women's lawyers were saying that the women will not get, or the children that will be born, the child will be born, will not get a life of dignity because a mother will not be able to take care of the child. But the Supreme Court did not accept these arguments. They said that no, in this case, the word life that is used in this law, that is the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, it does not really talk about life in the context of life of dignity. It just talks about life in the context of life and death. The mother in this case has been suffering from postpartum depression. Postpartum depression basically means depression after the birth of a child. So when she gave birth to a second child, since then, last September, she has been suffering from postpartum depression. But the court said that her mental condition will not affect the fetus, and the doctors multiple times from AIMS have said that it is possible that the child will be born healthy and it will not have any impact. They have even changed her medicines, saying that her medicine that she is taking will not have any negative impact on the health of the child. Now, the MPT, that is the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, was first introduced in India in 1971 and got amended in 2021. There were some changes that were made with this act. First, unmarried women are also covered now. Second, up to 20 weeks, you can have abortion with the permission of one RMP. RMP basically means Registered Medical Practitioner. In other words, doctor. Registered Medical Practitioner. So up to 20 weeks you can abort after permission of one registered doctor. Up till 24 weeks you can abort with permission of 2 doctors. After 24 weeks you have to have permission from the medical board. And that is only allowed in very, very specific circumstances. If it would be a danger to the pregnant mother's life, if the baby that will be born will be with life-threatening diseases, if it's a rape survivor, etc., only then we will have this law kicking in where you can use your right even after 24 weeks. But in this case, Supreme Court says that we do not have any such situation, so we cannot allow you to practically kill a child in the fetus. Now, this debate about abortion is not a new debate, especially if you look at the world context. In US, ever since the Supreme Court overturned the famous Roe versus Wade judgment, we have a big debate around the world about right to life versus the right to choice. In simple terms, right to choice means it should be the choice of the mother, the lady who is bearing the kid, to decide whether she wants to have a kid or not. On the other hand, the people in support of right to life says that when the fetus is formed, it is a life. So if you're aborting the kid, means you're essentially taking away a life. So the debate is whether the right to life of the baby is more important or whether the right to choice of the mother is more important. Now there are arguments on both sides of the story. It depends upon which side of the story you are on. For example, there are a lot of people who criticize abortion. The reasons, for example, are number one, they argue that the fetuses feel the pain. But again, there is no scientific study for that. There is no scientific basis, but there are many people who say that yes, fetuses do feel the pain. It can have psychological damage. It can also lead to selective abortion, where people, although it is illegal in India, but where people can somehow find out the gender of the child and then decide to take that decision. We have seen a lot of issues with girl infanticide in India. Then we have morality being put to question. On what basis do you decide this? On what basis do you take away a person's life? And it can even promote throwaway culture. People will not really be careful enough while taking their life decisions, and they would just argue that I can abort as many kids as I want. That will lead to even more abortions. On the other hand, there are people who actually support, this is supportive. There are people who support the idea of abortion. First, it leads to an individual, an adult making her own decisions. You need to understand that every adult can make their own decision. If they are intelligent enough to make a decision about who will come to power, they should be intelligent enough to take a decision about their own life. There is no proof of any pain that is felt by the fetus. It empowers women, allowing them to take their own choices. It prevents illegal abortion. See, when you tell a person or a lady that you cannot abort the child and the lady still wants to abort the child in any way, she will find out a way in some manner or not. When you do these things illegally, you are just increasing the danger that something will go wrong. Rather than that, if you just allow this to be done under proper medical care, you are actually saving the people's life. It would have impact on the mother's health as well. Reproductive choice also protects women from financial disadvantage. If the women, for example, understands that I will not be able to take care of the baby financially, maybe she doesn't have financial support of other family members, then she should be allowed to take that call for baby's future. Also, it can be an effective means of population control as well. In India, you see a lot of families with multiple children, 3, 4, 5 children, and even more than that. Maybe some of them did not want to have those kids, but they did have those kids, and now it's a population burden on the overall country. If we would have just allowed abortion to happen, we would not have had such a trouble going forward. The next article is a news about Gaganyaan. Every few days, every few weeks, you have a news about Gaganyaan coming into picture. The good news is on the 21st of October, we'll have the final testing stage. That will be about the test vehicle abort mission. Basically, the important thing about what makes Gaganyaan different from the earlier projects is it will be our first project where humans will be sent to space. That makes it even more dangerous because you have to bring them back. You have to make sure that they land safely. And this is the experiment, that test that will be done on the 21st of October to ensure that the crew escape system with all parachutes, etc., is detached from the module and they can actually land safely either in the Bay of Bengal or in the Arabian Sea. They will be detached at an altitude of about 17 kilometers from the Earth's surface, and after that they will have to define or they will have to show their capability to land safely either over the Bay of Bengal or over the Arabian Sea. Now this Gaganyaan project, as you know, has been delayed multiple times, mainly delayed due to the pandemic. It was supposed to be launched in 2022 itself. There are 4 astronauts that have been selected. They have been undergoing multiple rounds of training here. This is the idea of the entire Gaganyaan project. Again, the original launch was 2022. It has been delayed. It's hoped that ISRO is now at the end stage of making sure that all these different modules work well, because when you have humans inside these missions, you cannot take even 1% chance. There have been multiple tragedies in US in their history where we have seen astronauts coming back into Earth. When they enter the Earth's atmosphere, there is such a huge friction that they face that it leads to a lot of complicated issues. And this is why we are taking a lot of precautions here. India will be the 4th nation to launch a spaced mission with humans, with Russia, US and China being the first 3. India would want to be the 4th one. This Gaganyaan mission, as you know, it talks about launching a crew mission of 4 members total, the orbit of about 400 kilometers. It will not be a very long mission, it will just be a 3-day mission, and the aim is to bring them safely and land into the Indian waters. The idea is by the end of this year, or most probably in 2024, we will have this mission. After that, we will also have Vyom humanoid that will be then on the crew on board. So Vyom will be kind of a robot, that humanoid robot, so looks like human, kind of build like human, that will be sent along with the crew on board. It will be the first manned mission undertaken by ISRO. Remember, there has been an Indian astronaut that has gone to space, Rakesh Sharma, but he was on the Russian spacecraft. In an Indian spacecraft, no Indian or no human has ever gone to space. So this will be a new beginning for ISRO. The last article for today is about the Supreme Court saying that eventually the electoral bond issue will be decided by a 5-judge constitution bench. As you know, 2017, the Finance Act was passed under which the electoral bonds were introduced. 2018, electoral bonds were first introduced. The idea of electoral bond was that the government wanted to bring in more transparency into political donations. If you want to donate money to political parties, you go to specified branches of the State Bank of India. You give them money with the KYC. You can buy electoral bonds in the multiples of 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh, 1 crore. You take those bonds, they will not have your name. So these are called bearer bonds. You can donate to the political party of your choice. The political party must be that which got at least 1% votes in the last election. They will submit those bonds in their bank account and the SBI will transfer the money. That is the entire idea of electoral bonds. The government said it will bring more transparency, it will reduce cash donations, it will all be routed through the State Bank of India. Opposition parties obviously are not happy. They say that it is largely favoring the party in power. They say a majority of the donations have gone into the party in power. Ultimately, they control the State Bank of India, so for them it is not difficult to get to know who is the one who has been giving these electoral bonds. So there is a big debate about this. Also, this idea of questioning the electoral bond is not new. In fact, the question on electoral bonds were raised in 2018, 2019 itself. But what happened was the Supreme Court had then said that the elections are very near, let the 2019 elections be over, then we will hear the matter. But even then the matter just got delayed time and time again. Now the Supreme Court does not want to delay it any further. Now they are saying that a 5-judge constitution bench will look into the matter. Now as you know, constitution bench means at least 5 judges or more. They are made to look into constitutional matters. The petitioners have argued that political parties are not even disclosing their annual contribution reports to the Election Commission of India. The interesting part is the Supreme Court in 2019 said that political parties should disclose to the Election Commission of India how much money they are getting through electoral bonds. But the petitioners who have petitioned against this electoral bond idea say that the political parties have not been following this, and the electoral donation system, rather than becoming more transparent, has become even more opaque, with the party in power getting most of the money from it. Just understand this situation. If you are, let's say, the ruling party, SBI obviously under you, you can get a lot of report from the SBI. You can ask SBI how many electoral bonds were sold today, who came in, because you will have to do KYC in the bank. You'll have to submit your documents. So it's not very difficult for the ruling party to actually know who submitted or who bought the bond. They can tally it with how many bonds they received, and then they can get to know how many people are not supporting them. That is what the petition or the opposition parties are saying. The opposition parties, on the other hand, do not really have this advantage because they do not control the SPI. And that remains a big problem. There are arguments given against the idea of electoral bonds. Number one, it does not really have the person's name. Second bit of thing that most people ignored was how rules were changed for the companies. Earlier, only profit-making companies could buy electoral bonds up to a certain extent. Now, even if a company is not making profit, they can still buy electoral bonds. Meaning that it can now be used by shell companies who are not even making any profit just to divert their unaccounted money. That will also lead to a lot of issues. And these are most of the pointers that the petitioners have said against this electoral bond. They say that Income Tax Act says that parties do not need to file a return on these electoral bonds. The ruling party knows who donated the fund, but the public does not know. The opposition parties don't know. So when the public doesn't know who is getting money from where, how do they make the decision to actually vote in the end when the matter comes in? These are a few details about electoral bonds that you must remember about what electoral bonds are and how do they work. Foreign entities cannot buy this. They are not tradable in the market. You have to do KYC in the bank when you're buying this, although your name will not be mentioned in the electoral bond. That brings us to the end of today's discussion. Here are a couple of practice questions. First question is on the idea of right to health, palliative care. And the second question is about the idea of the EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment. Try and write this. Use a student answer writing portal, the link for which is in the description of the video. You can check each other's answers on that portal, give each other feedback to learn from each other's mistake. I'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. with the next session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. Do join in then. Bye-bye. Have a good day. Jai Hind.